Welcome to the Whose Body Is It podcast. I'm your host, Isabella Maiden. For those who don't know me, I'm a birth worker, a life coach, hypnotist, and a former liberal feminist turned radical truth teller. On this podcast, I expose the forces at play attempting to control our minds and bodies, such as transgender ideology, pornography, prostitution, and so much more. Together, we'll untangle patriarchal lies as you listen to jaw-dropping interviews with women from around the world. Warning, while listening to this podcast, you might find yourself triggered or perhaps notice where you've been biting your tongue on the issues that matter most to you. In my coaching and hypnosis, I help women and men stop getting triggered by every single thing, cultivate resilience, stop unwanted behaviors, and increase self-confidence. You can book your first session at whosebodyisit.com, and you can find that link in the episode show notes. And I just want to say that it's because of your endless support that I'm able to interview amazing women, get their stories out, and produce regular episodes for you. So with that being said, please like, comment, and subscribe to my channel on YouTube. And if you're listening in, leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. And also consider making a financial contribution via the link in my show notes. You can also visit my activist sticker shop. My pro-woman stickers have the power to intercept transhumanist programming. So take a photo of your stickers out in the wild and tag me on Instagram at Whose Body Is It. Without further ado, let's get into this week's story. Today, I speak with one of my best friends, Amy. Amy is a married mother of 5, a writer, and musician. Amy asks what reproductive sovereignty looks like on the procreative end rather than the abortion side, particularly for women in long-term heterosexual relationships. Amy shares her journey from birthing in the hospital to birthing at home with licensed midwives, then with her 5th baby, birthing freely, unassisted in the safety of her home. Amy decided to protect her postpartum bubble after 4 bouts of postpartum rage and depression, and recalls questioning the rage she felt as her newborn baby was passed around to 12 different family members. She now acknowledges this as a healthy mammalian instinct, but at the time remembers thinking she was just being too hormonal or too sensitive. Protecting the first 40 days postpartum, Amy sees as essential to preventing postpartum depression. She describes the cultural pressures to bounce back and to do it all as a metaphorical anorexia, one of restriction, the practice of internalizing receiving as a shortcoming, the I can do anything you can do bleeding mindset, where you might invisibilize yourself and needs as a woman. This, she notes, is the challenge that comes along with starting to receive from a place of biological vulnerability. The transformation she went through after prioritizing her mental and spiritual health in her 5th postpartum certainly paid off, and Amy believes receiving and resting while bleeding during menstruation is actually a training ground for recovering after birth. This didn't come easy. She had to retrain her nervous system to understand that it was actually okay to not do anything. We also discussed the pitfalls of constantly looking outside ourselves for rules, diets, and protocols, how Amy parents teenage boys, and the bizarre phenomena of men teaching women how to be more in the feminine. Amy, would you maybe just start by sharing just a little bit about who you are?
Yeah, so I'm Amy. I've been married for about 18 years. I have 5 children ranging from 3 to newly 17. And I encountered second wave literature right around the birth of my first daughter in 2010. So, yeah, almost 13 years ago now. And that totally changed my life. It was like the analysis that I needed to understand all these things that had led up to where I was. And I think that's how most women feel actually when they encounter the literature and it means something to them. As a woman, most of us don't grow up as girls seeing ourselves as part of a collective, like a material sex class. And so you can think that the things that have happened to you, or that the choices that you might have felt coerced to make, the situation that you find yourself in is just individual. And so it's so freeing, I think, for so many women to realize um, that we're part of a class of people with material, social, political interests, more or less. And I just couldn't stop reading once I discovered it. And yeah, but also apart from my interest in radical feminist literature, second wave literature, women's work, I worked as a conventional doula, as you know, you did also, for, I don't know, a handful of years in like 2006 to 2011. And don't do that anymore. Yeah, I play music and I write and I live in Maine, which is sort of shocking to me. I still wake up every morning and I'm like,
You left me in Texas.
yeah, I left Texas. I really miss it. I don't, every day I feel a little more like I've landed, but it's been a long time dream of mine, as you know, as bizarre as it sounds, because I love Texas. So yeah, we're here on this little 30-acre homestead on a brook, and it snowed today again. So yeah, we homeschool. We have too many dogs. That's about it.
Well, today I got the question in my Monday Q&A that I got to a day late. Today is Tuesday. We're recording on a Tuesday. I got the question, any advice for a woman in a heterosexual marriage raising a son? And I just thought, I have zero advice. But you should ask Amy. We should talk to Amy. Because, I think one thing that we also connected on when we met and became friends was our like pro-natalist stance. And like that is, there's a spectrum of opinions in the radical feminist kind of landscape. And, women like Mary Lou, like you, like myself, we're coming to that literature, to that analysis, while also still loving and wanting to partner with men and to have children. And so that is also maybe an addendum to this conversation, because I think, most women who don't have an idea about radical feminism, I've heard things, or like, I think I shared, I was like, what is that? Is it lesbian separatism? Is it a distrust of men? Is it a hatred of men? Is it misandry? Like, what is it?
Right. And there's like a kind of, I remember when I first encountered the literature, I had 3 kids. I was like 27 in a heterosexual marriage. And I remember thinking, oh, this isn't for me. Like I fell in love with the women, with their words, like Adrienne Rich, Audre Lorde, Germaine Greer. But I felt like, oh, there's no way I'd fit into a radical feminist circle or community because I don't have short hair. I do now. But, I had this idea that there's like an aesthetic. You don't have children. You're strong enough not to partner with a man. I had a lot of separatist ideas that I don't actually think I even got from the literature proper, but just somewhere else, like floating, which is kind of what you're speaking to, like that sort of extra. And I think so many women who don't identify with feminism could encounter the literature without all the trappings of culture and be moved by it and see themselves reflected in it without, yeah, do you have to wear like combat boots and only date women and be really angry, which I was really angry. It's okay to be angry.
Well, speaking to the kind of the pro-natalist stance, how did you veer? Like, how did you say, okay, well, I'm a mother, I'm centering my family, I'm centering my marriage, my kids, and I still have this. I mean, how did you like be like, oh wait, no, this is actually it. This is actually the core. This is actually, fundamental.
Adrienne Rich's book, I think, of Woman Born, on what's the subtitle? Institution of Motherhood. Motherhood is Institution and Experience, I think. I can't remember, but that book is beautiful. She's a mother to, I can't remember anymore, 2 or 3 boys. And so I think I could see myself reflected in her musings on motherhood. And she also goes into the I don't know that she calls them abuses, but she's essentially dancing around the abuses latent in the like industrial baby delivery complex.
Mm.
And so I could see myself in that. But it wasn't until, gosh, probably finding Yolanda's writing, like in 2016, 15, sometime around there. I don't even know how I got through the internet to find that. It's like I found the idea of like free birth, unassisted birth. And I was like, oh my God, it all made sense because at that point I'd still just given birth with licensed practitioners and uh yeah, it's like until you unpack that, you don't even understand the idea of bodily autonomy from a feminist perspective because women are still, getting convinced to consent to rape in their own house through a medical midwife.
Mm-hmm.
I'm wondering why we emerge traumatized. And, if you can't unpack that. So to me, that was a huge bridge to take the like crunchy but more normal birth experiences I'd had at home with conventional midwives. And then I could feel all of this like rage and desire for liberation and freedom personally and connect it to the various birth movements, that ebb and flow over the decades. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, no one, well, people do think of free birth as feminist, but of course, it's like a catch all. Like, you were talking about earlier, like you have Orthodox women, fundamentalist women, hippie women, you have all kinds. It's not, you don't have to identify as a political feminist, but so that I think, yeah, it was Adrienne Rich's book. And then realizing like, oh, I've dated women, but I'm not a lesbian. So I'm like, oh, I don't have to be a lesbian. It's okay that I've given birth. I can forgive myself for breeding, unpacking all of that. I can forgive myself for having penetrative sex with a man and enjoying it.
Mm.
Speaking of rules, like we were talking about earlier, like, which feminism still needs to unpack all of that because, there are so many in the antinatalist world who still refer to women as breeders and all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Or there, you've talked about like an open distaste for children, like that children are, you're the first person that brought this to my attention. You said something like, children are the only class of people that uh society has just said, like, it's okay to hate them.
Right. To talk about how disgusting they are,
Right.
annoying. I mean, people almost at once talk about them like they're disabled and like, mentally ill and just this huge like burden on society. And then that just goes straight to mother hate, woman hate,
Mm-hmm.
because who does the care work, who's growing them in our bodies. So yeah, which we don't have to get too deep into that, but it makes me think about the current like humanity as a cancer, a blight on the earth. I don't know, that's been going on at least 5 years. And it's just ramping up with the whole transhumanist. And so you see women in their 30s like, I would never
Mm-hmm.
ever bring children into this like hellscape of a world just to make it worse. And yeah, just all the ways that we're sort of encouraged not so subtly to hate ourselves, self-loathing, not just as women, but as humans.
Mm-hmm. And this is not to say that women who don't want to have kids are in a cycle of self-hate, but
Mm-mm.
there is something in conflict. Like I think there is something there with the biological design. If you are having sex with men and don't want kids, there is something like my body can be the enemy to
Mm-hmm.
some degree. If I don't want to procreate and I'm doing something that leads to
That possibility.
reproduction,
Yeah.
that possibility, there is a dynamic of the the wanting and the not wanting, the that
Mm-hmm.
I could see how there's that conflict. Like I got to a point where I couldn't even contemplate dating or even, entertaining the idea of being with a man who off the bat would be like, no, I don't want kids, or I don't want your kids, or like, if you got pregnant, I'd want you to have an abortion. Like, I'm just
Mm-hmm.
like, this is just my body. This is just what happens when we do this thing. And so if you're not resigned to that,
Right.
I don't think there's anything to do here, but
It's not an acceptance of your womanhood. And I've like in my own marriage, that was a long road for us to help him understand that it's not so much about wanting a baby or wanting a baby now, but for me, it was about wanting to feel totally embraced and accepted in my own femaleness, which sex is like the last bastion of that for most heterosexual women, is like, can you have full reproductive choice or sovereignty or acceptance in your heterosexual relationship? Like, where,
Mm.
anyway, that's an opinion I hold too, is that women more or less should like call the shots when it comes to procreation in a committed heterosexual relationship, because I feel like that's just as important as being able to talk about ending a pregnancy termination, because a woman's not going to get pregnant when she doesn't want to. Like, she's not going to try to conceive when it's bad for her or bad for her family. So in like fundamentalist religion, you have the other side of that where women are encouraged to just, or even sometimes forced to have baby after baby. And then in the more like woke world, you have, I know so many women personally who've been in long-term monogamous heterosexual relationships or even marriages for 10 plus years, and they're like begging their very
Mm.
progressive boyfriend or husband, like, please, could you contribute this like cell so that I can be a mother? And there's like a kind of almost slavery in that too, to my mind, which is that
Mm.
either way, you're begging a man, you know, for something. And obviously, to make a baby, you want your partner, your male partner, to be on the same page. But
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I just think it's women's work, and women aren't going to. We're not going to get ourselves into trouble. We're not going to make a decision one way or the other that's bad for ourselves and bad
Mm-hmm.
for our families.
Are you speaking when you say the like more secular, the more progressive couple? Are you talking about a scenario where like the woman is really ready for a baby, she wants
Oh,
to have a baby, and then the husband is saying something like, "I'm not ready," or like she's trying to get him on board? Is that the scenario that you're talking about?
yes.
Okay.
And I have so many friends who were in that scenario for even more than a decade. And actually, one of my close friends years ago who was in that situation was the one who turned me on to this idea of like, what is full reproductive sovereignty? Is it just termination?
Mm.
Like, or can we actually choose when we want to become mothers? Or what is it like to be sort of railroaded into a monogamous relationship where maybe you agreed in the beginning that, we'll have kids at some point, but it wasn't nailed down. And then years and years and years go by, and women are in their mid to late 30s, and the husband's kind of like really believes in a way that I think we wouldn't maybe tolerate when it comes to abortion, really believes that like it's his choice.
Mm.
I mean, that's a really nuanced topic because ideally couples aren't arguing about this anyway, but just to
But
kind
it
of,
is. I hear it all the time. It's totally, I mean, like you said, we both know women and have had friends in that scenario.
right, where it's like that's what our bodies do. And often, of course, not all women, but I'd venture to say most women at some point with the right support and in the right relationship are going to have like a maternal urge, a desire.
Hmm.
And so it's just so weird to see under the banner of like progressivism, these progressive relationships where women will really beg for years to become impregnated. It just doesn't feel very progressive to me.
Yeah, I would totally agree. I would totally agree. And it's convenient if, the employment path, if they're on like similar employment paths, they have corporate jobs or
Mm.
um everyone around them is waiting or now getting, incentivized financially to wait, their job is offering them a stipend for third party reproduction or, whatever the case is.
Right.
So that kind of leads into what we'd been talking about over the past week, which is like instinct versus instinct injury. And
Mm.
I was feeling conflicted over the past few weeks. And I took to Instagram, and I basically the backstory is that I had a wonderful conversation, an interview with Cherry Smiley, who's just like, oh my gosh, incredible. She had brought up her grandmother, some of the menstrual rules that her grandma had been subjected to as a girl, and how they were rules of patriarchy. I mean, these weren't like rules from like the women that they had come together and they'd been like, you know what, I think all the young girls need? I think they should never walk behind the elders, like that's what I gathered, that it was, an extension of the patriarchy or some kind of patriarchal kind of arbitrary rule to impose on the girls. And she was kind of speaking to the fact that, you know the girls had all these rules, right? They were subjected to all these rules where her male peers just were not. And we can find examples of that in like school dress codes and like, whatever example you want to pull out. And it brought up a lot for me because my first thought was like, okay, I feel like I have subjected myself to some cyclical living stuff, which isn't patriarchy, but they are rules, and not all the rules resonate. And so I found myself saying, Isabella, you should rest, you're bleeding, but I wasn't tired. And so I took to Instagram and I just said, I'm sick of the rules. Like Cherry Smiley brought up a wonderful point about, these rules always being applied to women. And then I was thinking about the first 40 days thing. And I was like, what if I don't want to rest for 40 days? What if I want to wash my hair? What if I want to drink ice? The Ayurveda guards are going to get really mad and whatever. But then I just got so many interesting responses. I got every response from, thank you for saying this about the first 40 days. It's totally elitist. And like, I could never do that. Everything from that to like, whoa, Isabella, like, this is like a reclamation of the physiologic design of our bodies, and like women resting like helps prevent prolapse, and like 40 days goes by really quickly. And like, I think you're conflating, rules of the patriarchy with like suggestions that support the physiologic design. So I got responses kind of across the board. And then, some in the middle kind of meeting me where I was at, which was like, yeah, there are a lot of rules. And isn't that interesting? We're being inundated with prescriptions and diets and wellness plans and biohacking devices and this diet and, whatever. It's just like constant onslaught of
Like
choices.
dictates and do this, do
Yeah.
that. Yeah. Oh,
Yeah. And
so much,
so,
especially in like the wellness world, even to like zoom out of birth and womanhood. Yeah, it's overwhelming. Eating bread, which I do all the time.
I just started doing that again, and it's awesome.
I never gave it up. I never could, but I'll admit I carried like some weird tinge of religious guilt about that, which is what, but I don't feel bad when I eat bread. So I'm just going to eat bread.
Right. Right.
Which
Like
is
I
sort of,
should, but I don't. Am I missing something here?
yeah, I feel great. I mean, sure, if I only ate bread, maybe I wouldn't feel good. Yeah, we started having dessert almost every night, like a year ago, my family. Everyone's fine.
No.
That's one of the things. Like, I'm an old like Weston A. Pricer, which I still, hold a lot of that in the back of my mind. But just this idea that you would like never feed your kids sugar. And I grew up in a family where my mom cooked and baked all the time. So that's just another example where it's like I started doing that, and now the little girls will say, okay, so what's for dessert at the end of, a really nourishing meal? And I'm like, let's have some chocolate, everybody.
Yeah,
It's
let's like
great.
enjoy ourselves.
Let's
Like,
live.
let's
Yeah.
live a little.
And it's fun. And it feels amazing. And it actually feels very like moderate. Everyone's okay. They all eat their vegetables and meat. Everyone's fine.
Okay. While we put a pin on the coming, we're going to come back to okay, now we're in a food zone. And so I have to bring up something about food that I
Yeah,
also
yeah.
learned from you and appreciate and have gone through in my own process. But we'll come back to the instinct versus instinct injury, the rules. We'll come back to that. But before we go back to that, with all the diet culture and the culture around like us being poisoned and like poisonous foods and like, yeah, there are like scary dyes that I would not raise a family on primarily, that are, in M&Ms or whatever. But you had, and I don't know how much detail you want to go into, but I remember you saying with like learning more about German new medicine, and I kind of was on a similar trajectory of just like releasing the grip, rather than like reinforcing the like, you can't have that because that is poison, or I
It's
can't eat that
scary. It's
because
all
that's
scary.
poison. It's all
Yeah.
scary.
That's how
But
I was raising my children unintentionally.
right,
It's all
right.
scary. You can't
But
eat an Oreo at a school party. You
right.
can't, it's all carcinogenic. I mean, these are things I was actually telling my children, and glad I got saved.
Well, I remember you saying, how hard the family reunions were because you had such you were feeding them such like intent in such an intentional way at home, and then they would go to the family reunion and like eat all the things, and then everyone would get sick.
Right.
And the question was like, why is that? Is it
Right.
because their body couldn't tolerate the poison, or was it because of the energy around talking about these bad
Restriction.
poisonous foods and the restriction? And yeah, so that I also like loved
Well, it makes
to
me think
just
about
witness. Yeah.
Halloween. You know,
Yeah.
I've always felt like when our kids were really little, we have five and we had three first. And so we had like the first batch of children. And when they were little, we would like trade them for Halloween candy, like give them raisins, or they were too little to even know what they were missing out on. And we love Halloween as a family. And then when they got older, gosh, probably early elementary school, I just sort of thought it doesn't really matter. It's they have it for like 3 days and I throw it away because it's so gross and they don't even want it. I just let them binge for a few days. It's so exciting. And then they wake up one morning, they know the drill. And so, but then, I have my two little girls. So they just like grew up eating Halloween candy, right? With all the dyes, all the carcinogenic petroleum byproduct. And it's funny because the kind of holistic moms come out in October on social media and start talking about how they would never let their children. And I mean, I guess on a spectrum of being a mom, I think of myself as pretty holistic, whatever that might mean. But it's funny, I'm not really a type A person, so I've never attached too
Mm.
hard to these ideas.
Hmm.
Like there's always been, like, I don't buy junk food because I don't think it tastes that good. But if we're out and about, I've tried to have a very like
Hmm.
light touch around. Although I did wake up to realize that I was like feeding my kids a lot of fear-based, almost like propaganda actually, when I think of Finding Tommy John when I hurt my back earlier this year, and he's like,
Hmm.
what is it that he says? He says, what if it's not the fucking food? And I
Right.
love that because like I have so many older people in my family line who smoke cigarettes since they were 12 and just lived on cookies till for their last decade of their life, like literally store-bought cookies, whiskey, and cigarettes, mowing their lawn at 96. And so there's something that's not food here. And so when my kids now feel sick, I used to, they'd get a fever and I go, oh my God, it must have been that ice cream we ate,
Right.
just like ridiculous. And it's nice to now just say, oh, you just need to rest and not make anything the culprit. Just, oh,
Right.
let me, one of my daughters felt sick today. I felt really sick actually and came in from the woods. And I just tucked her in. We didn't have to go through this litany of like, what have we done? And like,
Going through the
what's
investigative checklist
yeah,
or
what's attacking us? It's just like another variation of germ theory. So I just kind of tucked her in her bed. She was sweaty. She had the cold cloth. We laughed and talked for a while. And, it feels really nice to be like unhooked from all the narratives,
mm,
which kind of, feed into the food thing, also into maybe I guess, yeah, when people make sort of a dogma or a religion out of understanding, yeah, there are truths about human nutrition and there are truths about the female physiologic design. But when you create this really fear based, restrictive dogma around it,
mhm,
and like you were telling me when we talked last week, that women were expressing a lot of guilt, right? When they can't live up to
mhm.
whatever it is that they're consuming, whether it's like in a book or on social media, on the internet, like I should be eating these things. I should be. And to me, that's the biggest issue is like if you feel guilt, I don't know, then it's just like more externally imposed
Mhm.
when to talk about instinct injury, when we're constantly just like scanning for direction, in our own lives and what to do with our own bodies. And I will say I've benefited so much, and we talked about this, from really just paying attention to my bleed and allowing myself to rest during my bleed. And now it's like something I can't even give up. I'm on day 4 now, and this is the first day that I really feel that I can do anything that's not bleed. I mean, really, after I guess it's been a few years, maybe 4. But I also, and there are times that I feel I'm 39, and sometimes I feel almost it's bittersweet because I enjoy my cycle so much in a way that I never have. So sometimes I think, oh, why did I have to be 35, 36 to, at the relative like end of my time as a woman? It wasn't something when I started bleeding at 14
Mhm.
that I encountered. I didn't have like a daily or weekly, monthly practice about how to come to terms with my female body. And to me, that's really what cyclical living is about. It's because you can intellectually know, like, Your blood is not disgusting. You are not other, the female body, but you may not know that cellularly or on a psychic level. And so to me, that's what cyclical living has done is like it's, I don't even know what cyclical living is, but to me, I usually mark my head with my blood so my family knows that I'm bleeding. I have red sheets and I eat really good food, like because my appetite's up a little and I just don't do anything. Like I don't parent that much. It's a little chaotic. I don't do laundry. If I can help it, like
Everyone's like, yeah, mom's off. Woo.
yeah, they love it. I don't go on walks or hikes. I'll go outside, but I don't exercise. And again, this to me feels hard won. I actually remember I had this friend who was kind of peaking to radical feminism when I was pregnant. She was just, like a liberal feminist, and she was kind of peaking, a longtime friend. We'd had our first babies together, and she was kind of interested in radical feminism from the embodied perspective of womanhood, how a lot of women come into it. And she said, I still don't like my period. Like, do you like your period? And I remember at that point, I thought that was such a great question. And I was pretty neutral on it. So I didn't really have an answer for her. Like I said, this was 2019. And I remember thinking, I don't like it, but I don't hate it,
Mm.
and now I love it. So for me, it's just like this whole stair step to, um, and it's about more than just your monthly blood. Like I've had two miscarriages and, so many women talk about the foreign experience. It's about all of it. It's about just like accepting what comes out of your body that's not within your control. This is not something men have any experience with, the milk, the blood, birth, miscarriage. Like our bodies really are just like a wonder of both rhythm and unpredictability. And so I think cyclical living, whatever that might mean, because that's such a broad term for any individual woman and how that might work in her life. For me, it's been such a gift because instead of being like, wow, what an inconvenience, which is how I grew up, I just mark my time like I'm a woman. I am other. I'm not a man. I don't mean other like a marginalized, dirty person, but yeah, I'm not male. And when I'm bleeding, I'm not doing your laundry, you know.
Yeah. And something that you brought to my attention, which was when I think we were like, okay, let's talk more about this in a more formal way. But because I'm a maiden, because I don't have children, like I'm on my own schedule, I work for myself. I mean, I can rest whenever you pointed out that as a maiden, I can, with a degree of like safety, security, and freedom, I can rest when I want to rest. I can go to bed when I want to go to bed. And so when it comes to my bleed, it's not such a stark contrast. Like I'm not constantly serving my family,
Mhm.
where I'm like, okay, everyone, mom time, it's mom's time now, Also, my bleeds are the way they are and they might be different. My body might feel totally different after 5 children, probably some degree, there's going to be some shifts there, of course. So, yeah, when like I was coming to that conversation as a maiden who was like, I don't want to sleep when I bleed. I don't want to not walk when I bleed because like my life is I am I feel pretty freaking nourished. And I think more so than how I was existing as a lib fem, so I already
Mhm.
kind of on some level, can adapt based on my physiology. I have adapted to my needs. And so when it comes to that more concentrated time of, shedding and a call for nourishment, it's not such a stark contrast from what I'm already kind of doing. And I think that connection was like a light bulb maybe moment when you mentioned that. I'm like, oh duh, I like rest all the time.
Right, right.
And then the other thing that you brought up, but you can speak, I'd love for you to speak to is the yeah, just being in the practice of receiving and how as a mother, like and being a young mother too, like that was a longer process that you've arrived
Oh,
to, like a
yeah.
point that you've arrived to now.
Yeah, I think learning to receive as women for a lot of us can be really difficult, especially like what you're saying. I had my first baby at 22. And so I was young, very healthy, very like spry. I was running through almost my whole pregnancy, 2 or 3 miles a day. I don't know, I'd been an athlete like in high school. And I remember going to one of my postpartum checkups, and the nurse midwife I must have been 4 weeks out, something. I wasn't quite 6 weeks. And she said, "Oh, are you?" I mentioned that I was running again or something, and because I had laughed at her suggestion that I don't. And she said, "Your organs can actually fall out of your body." And I laughed so hard. I mean, this is like the naivety of a 22-year-old. And she
What
looked at
did she
me.
say? She said what did she
Your
say about your
organs
organs?
can like fall out. They can
Oh,
start
she
to
said,
edge like
yeah.
a
Okay.
prolapse.
Hmm.
And I just had never heard. I mean, I didn't know any. I didn't have a friend who had baby. I had nothing. Like, if the only thing I knew was that women may be closer to my mom's age. Like, my mom's friends had like 10-year-olds. Like, I didn't know anything about motherhood or mothering or women's bodies. And yeah, I just laughed. And that's just one of those things I won't forget, because she looked at me so sternly. She's like, "I'm serious, you know? And I was like, well, mine were never going to fall out. I'm just going to run like day 3 of every postpartum." Like, just the sort of, I don't even know what you want to call it, the arrogance or,
Hmm.
um, but what I was telling you on the phone is that, and then I had my next 2 babies at home. Of course, the home birth midwives would say, just try not to do dishes for a week or two. Just try, like, they'll be there. And if people come over, don't have them just hold the baby. Like, maybe they'll clean your bathroom. Like, just these really sweet midwives kind of like trying to create, even subtly, like a different culture for women, a different experience, because we're so used to fawning, being socialized. Like, here, you do want to hold my baby. And this feeds into all of it, actually, because I didn't know until I had my 5th baby, who was born free, fully sovereign, wild, autonomous pregnancy. I had all of this rage when I found in 2016, 2017. Um, I'd already heard of unassisted birth and I'd been reading about it for years, but I'll call it like the modern free birth movement, because I knew that postpartum was a time to rest. I knew that nobody touches the baby except the mother unless she invites them to. It's like I knew all of those things in my body, and all of a sudden, all of this like depression, anxiety, which was actually just like postpartum rage, had a place to go. Sort of like finding the feminist analysis back in 2010,
Hmm.
which, because I looked back and I'd had all these like beautiful undrugged home births, but like then everyone held my baby. They wash my baby and measure her for an hour, and I don't touch her in the little home birth pictures. I'm just on the side. Then I feel that it's totally normal to have my in-laws and my family and my friends and everyone come over for the first week to my house, and everyone passes my baby around. Then maybe day 4 or 5, I go out to a restaurant with some other people who came into town to see my baby. Literally 12 people pass my baby around a restaurant day 5. I mean, we're animals. And I was enraged. And I remember thinking that maybe I was crazy. Maybe I was just hormonal. Maybe I was just sensitive. But you see the internalized misogyny. And so I really think this idea of like first 40 days or 4 weeks or whatever it is, and whatever a woman can do in any given situation, um, like I shared with you on the phone, I actually had 4 postpartums that were really difficult, but I don't know that I would have been able to admit that then, because I had so much like hubris and pride and wasn't able to receive, because I felt that that was like a shortcoming. I wanted to be hard. I wanted to, when people would come over and say, "Oh, do you want me to clean your bathroom?" I wanted to be the woman that said, "I don't want you to do anything. Like, I want you to," because I don't mean anything. Right.
Mm.
So there's like this almost this anorexia that, like, metaphorically, of course, but also I'm sure it's a similar posture that feeds into like food withholding, like where you just sort of like invisibilize yourself and your needs
Mm.
as a woman, and you can't receive. It feels really uncomfortable to receive when you start receiving out of a place of vulnerability, like actually, like actual physical, biological vulnerability postpartum.
Right, right.
So I feel like almost the bleed is like a training ground for postpartum.
Mm.
That's just something I've thought of. It's like, what is it like?
Hmm.
Like, I'll bring all my journals, all the novels I'm reading, whatever, and I'll sit in my bed. And Well, I mean, I get up. There aren't rules. It's not like I'm not allowed to leave my room, but I mean, I have 5 children. I really like, I like once a month to stay in my room. I really do. I love it. And so, but like Zach, at least one, if not two of the nights, like he'll bring me dinner that he's made and I just get to eat it on top of my bed. It just feels, I watched 3 movies this bleed, like all day, this trilogy that I'd been wanting to watch. Just crazy, crazy things that I would never do. Never in my life. I would never be able to justify that kind of indulgence. And I don't really want to on a regular day. I don't want to just sit and watch 3 movies. That sounds really weird.
Mm-hmm.
Depressing. You know, I don't want to eat by myself in my room. That just sounds strange. But
Oh
it's
my God.
but it feels so good to do it,
Yeah.
And so yeah, I was just thinking about the receiving and postpartum and how my fifth baby, my fifth postpartum, I was very hypervigilant about really my mental and spiritual health because I'd just been through a hell and back. My fourth baby's postpartum, I actually got on Zoloft, a pharmaceutical, for about 6 to 8 weeks, which I'd never been on anything like that before. I was like having really, I was really disconnected from reality. And I won't go into all of the kind of hairy details, but it was really like the scariest time in
Mm.
my life because I kind of pride myself on being a really like optimistic and hard person. Like I can just, and I felt like I'd sort of lost the thread. And I, looking back, I mean, that was the result of not only a traumatic birth, but so many postpartums where I had no support starting day 2 or 4. And I'd kind of trained myself, or the culture had helped trained me, right? To be, that's fine. I'm healthy, I'm young, I'm athletic. Why? I mean, I'll hold one baby and cook and uh, potty train the 2 year old. Like, I'll do whatever. It's fine. I don't need anyone, right? And I'm not saying like that's my personality. Some women might find it really easy to receive. It wasn't something that came
Mm-hmm.
naturally for me. And you know what? You told me that someone, a man, actually had said this is really interesting to talk about this out loud. That he talked about, are we making women docile? Which I don't agree with that at all. But what I think might be more interesting to sort of piggyback on what he said is I'm looking back at my own almost irrational terror in receiving and resting, and I wonder, at least for me, and this could be true for other women, is appearing docile vulnerable? Like I feel like we may have an epigenetic resistance to allowing ourselves to
Mm.
just lay back and be kind of you know, like I can't think of the word, but what I mean is like out of commission, right? In certain situations, in certain regions, like that's not safe. It's not safe to be a woman that needs help. It's not safe to be a woman that's lying down
Mm-hmm.
for days or weeks. And I think, and women also being thought of as the weaker sex, I feel like there was probably some subconscious part of me that didn't feel safe resting and receiving and also wanted to prove
Mm.
that I don't need any of that. But then I hit this breaking point
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't really actually want to rest during my fifth postpartum. I just didn't want to go crazy. And that's really true. Like I wasn't thinking like this is going to be so fun and beautiful. I just thought I can't ever go through that again. So I'll do whatever. I'll do whatever I have to do. I'll just free bleed. I'll stay in bed with my baby. No one will come to my house for 7 days. I'm not really close with my in laws. And so I was like, they won't come for 5 or 6 weeks to see the baby. Like, I'll hurt anyone's feelings. I will not go crazy again,
Mm-hmm.
you know? But that's what it took for me to just stay in bed naked. We had this great backyard where off the green belt in Austin, and I would just have some underwear on and go lay on a blanket. So I'd be outside with my baby and nurse. And there were times I actually felt panic or terror, like a claustrophobia.
Mm.
Oh my God, it's day 11. I haven't gone anywhere. Oh no, it's day 20. But again, it was over. I mean, I didn't even do 40 days because my husband went back to work, but I really had to kind of retrain and reinform my nervous system that it was okay to not do anything. And I don't know if other women can relate to that at all. There were times I felt almost panic,
Mm-hmm.
like I haven't cooked, I haven't done dishes. What's happening? I haven't left the house. But looking back, it was the most beautiful time of my entire life. I mean, it was almost psychedelic. It was so beautiful. And I didn't have any anxiety, I didn't have any insomnia, I had no lasting postpartum issues that I'd actually had with every single baby. Every single baby I'd had, not to get too like diagnostic-y talk, but some mental health issues that would crop up at 4 months postpartum, 6 months. And with my last baby, I just felt better and better each 6 month, year-long period that went by. And I feel like that,
Mhm.
I think that's the whole purpose, right, of resting, is that it doesn't come back to get you later. There's like a cost that has to be paid at some point, I think, at least with postpartum.
Mm. Yeah. Like you're making an investment
Mm-hmm.
in the future. Yeah, that is the way that I educated, like when I was teaching childbirth ed, when I was a doula, when I was like counseling couples and moms, and that was totally in a culture that was like the most charged on not doing that, like New York City, upper middle class, white, heterosexual couples, like it was who all worked. I mean, all the moms were working and going back to work really fast. And so it wasn't considered, they didn't think it was elitist, but they just thought it was not really attainable. And again, I'm making a generalization of most of the kind of the women that I served, but there were certainly exceptions. But yeah, I think so. I think that comment was interesting. It was a direct message that I had permission to share anonymously. Um, it was a man, you were speaking to the man who left that comment, and he was speaking to the trend of like all the polarity like stuff, and that the trainings for women seem to be centered on becoming softer and more like doing less in terms of, I mean, each program is, preaching something different, and they're not all the same, and I'm not suggesting that they're all useless, but I think he was speaking to kind of a general trend of women seeing more value in like softness, and that being like kind of in its worst being portrayed as like docile and doing nothing. And all the
Mm-hmm.
men's trainings, by contrast, were all about capability and tasks and like more and like container building. I think that's what he was speaking to. And I've definitely felt resistance like to the polarity stuff. And this is also, conversations we've had, not that talking about polarity or acknowledging that there is a polarity between men and women, because obviously that's like really important to talk about right now with all the trans, stuff. But you know, I think a woman with a rad fem analysis who does not have kids, who maybe doesn't want kids, doesn't plan to have kids, will hear the I can't do anything when I bleed and think, oh no, some misogynist is going to hear that and be like, this is why she's not fit for the job, or this is why she can't do this,
Right,
or this is
totally.
why she can't fulfill this role, which is why I think it scares, it has scared me to be like, oh shit, well, that could be twisted and used against
Yeah.
us.
Because we've had to prove ourselves, right?
Yeah.
Historically. And so, yeah, I was just thinking, I saw this on Instagram recently, like women's bodies aren't made for the 9 to 5 grind. Whether or not I agree with that actually isn't the point, but seeing how you could unpack that from a different lens, which is a woman saying, oh, do you mean I actually can't provide for myself? Is that what you're saying?
Right.
Do you mean that I can't? But again, it's sort of like this pinball machine going back and forth. I was thinking about when I was little. Do you know Annie Oakley? She's
Mm-hmm.
anything you can do, I can do better. And then that sort of morphed into anything you can do, I can do bleeding. So I was thinking about
Yes.
that before our call and how that, yeah, as a kid and then as a teenager, I would just like stick a tampon in and go run 8 miles cross country. But
Right.
eventually, like I've shared with you on our personal calls, I had, I guess, starting in my early 30s, a lot of pretty debilitating period pain, from just living in complete at odds with my body. And I definitely grew up thinking I need to compete with male people, which is a whole other thing to unpack. But one thing I do want to say regarding not just polarity but cyclical living is that I think it really matters who is doing the teaching or the suggesting, because a lot of these, I've kind of been in and out of the polarity world and curious about it for 2 years now. And I think like most programs that I've seen that are aimed at women, maybe 90% of them are taught by men. So that to
Yes.
me is a
Oh
huge,
my gosh. John, what's his name? John Wineland
right.
is a
And then
really
there,
popular one.
there are
Yeah.
these two guys that I don't know their name, but they run this like academy for femininity. So,
Yes. Thank you for saying
so
that.
that
Yeah.
I would never, just based on healthy instinct,
Yeah.
I would never give any man money to tell me how to be a woman. First of all, let's just take it out of patriarchy. What? Like, you're not a woman. Just as I would never
So
venture,
bad.
if I thought I understood polarity in and out, I would never decide to start an academy to teach men how to be men. What is going on? That's completely insane, even if you take it apart from like different power structures. So that's crazy. And then I've had some acquaintances who've come out of those sort of like weird internet schools, and they a lot of them emerge engaged in what I will call, and actually it's a word used by a prominent woman who does teach, I don't know if she would call it polarity, but like feminine devotion or conscious femininity. She talks a lot about contortion and how contortion is actually the sort of fake or the underbelly of like a physiological feminine softness and like openness to receive. So what happens is you get a lot of women who come out of these schools run by men, and it's all about contorting.
Mm,
No different than the strictures of patriarchal femininity, which is how do you make yourself subordinate
right.
with your
Right.
body language, with your voice, with your, and none of that, the women that I am intrigued by or respect that are kind of in that world talk a lot about how, first of all, like you have to be a sovereign being. Like anything that you watch on a screen or read in a book, like if it doesn't feel good to you, you need to know that you're not going to do it. So just this idea that, a woman might say, I'm a teacher, but not everything I say is right. Like I'm a human being. So you have to meet women in this place where it's like, if you don't like this, then don't take it home with you. Right. Like we're not talking about strictures or rules or
Mm-hmm.
prescriptives. And so I really like when any teacher comes to the table with that kind of like a prerequisite, if you will, like remember, we're not in a cult. Because I think that's so
Right.
hard. Those of us who've grown up with just like mainstream media, maybe religious dogma, that it's hard for us to see a teacher on a pedestal and not, a lot of people just immediately want to take it all in, just take it in like a sponge.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think it's important to remember that anything we encounter, especially in this like cancel culture, insane age where you have to lead with like read this book, but there's one part that's like not totally true.
Right. Right.
I'm so sorry. It's like we can think, like we can sift, we can do that work. And so I think about that actually a lot with polarity. And so like my number one thing with polarity is like if men are telling women how to be women,
Red flag.
just unspeakable red flag. It's crazy. I mean, that's insane. It's just like church. It's like abusive church. Women really do come out of it with certain behaviors and mannerisms that seem almost like cult-like.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I don't want to get too far off on that.
Yeah. What do you think about, well, you said the word church, and I know my church going listeners might be like, oh, what does she mean? No, that's fine because that brings up another point, which is what do you think of the all the new Christians like that have emerged
Oh, wow, that's a
in the
great
past
question.
like 3 years? Yeah. And obviously there's a spectrum, not everyone has, when I say Christians, I mean everything from those following the teachings of Jesus Christ to organized religion, but just yeah, what do you think about this, the new age to Christianity kind of thing that we've seen?
I think it definitely runs parallel to the like pandemic, which woke so many of us up. Like I was never on the like trans train bandwagon, but I didn't actually see how a radical feminist analysis and just actually an analysis of the body of reality instead of like postmodernist mumbo jumbo had anything to do with transhumanism or big pharma. And so I think that just like shook us up collectively. Those of us who might have been awake to something, but maybe not all of it. And I think a lot of people, I really don't want this to sound infantilizing because I don't mean it, but I can see how going through that, people are going to be drawn to find something that's going to anchor them. And I'm someone that grew up in the church and admittedly had, and still in some ways, I've had to work through a lot of trauma from that upbringing in various parts of my life. But I'll admit to like not being bothered. Not that
Totally.
it's my life, but me 5 to 10 years ago probably would have felt really like triggered, to use the
Mm-hmm.
horrible word.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm really not, because I've actually found so much, like I'm not right wing and I'm not Christian. But what's been so cool about the whole pretend pandemic and waking up to transhumanism and how it has its hooks and like all these aspects of our lives is that I found so much common ground with people that I never would have before. And I've been able to see the humanity in a group of people that I had too much like legitimate pain, like really terrible childhood experiences, to actually see the humanity in those people anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And not to mention, media is going to piggyback, at least this has how it worked for me as like a liberal.
Mm-hmm.
Media piggybacks on a lot of the like adult people who have childhood religious trauma, right? Because the media is so like anti-Christian, anti-conservative, anti-religion, anti-traditional family, anti-natalist, on
Mm-hmm.
and on and on. And so it's nice to see that too, how of course like horrific things happen under the protection of organized religion. And there's also like a whole media smear campaign against
Yes.
these cultural institutions that may keep us more or less, I don't know what the word might be, but like stable, sovereign, where children are protected. Do you know what I mean?
For sure. I wouldn't describe my upbringing as religiously traumatic. I think I just didn't like it. And I definitely put up a fight. I don't think I was like victimized by the church necessarily, or like it was more, I describe myself as a cultural Jew. I think I was also a cultural Catholic, except I couldn't quite put a pin on what the culture of Catholicism was as far as I like experienced it. But I definitely felt more, my dad is Jewish, my mom is Catholic, so I had all my sacraments and but was had the strong cult. The predominant culture of my upbringing was Judaism, like the culture of being a Jew, the race of being a Jew versus the religion of being raised Catholic by my mom. So, but with that said, I totally was an arrogant little lib Nazi, I don't know, but
Live
yeah, just
Nazi.
lib
Yeah.
Nazi looking down on, as I was like, I'm not Catholic, my mom's still Catholic. That's weird. These stupid religious whatever, and I definitely have healed that. Also just being in service to religious women helps with that. Like you said, humanizing. It's a weird kind of neoliberal indoctrination. I definitely still found myself judging women that I used to know who, went off so far as to be like yoga is satanic and we've had it all wrong. The all this paganism is and the antichrist, or whatever. That's the part of it that gets like made fun of on progressive
Mhm.
podcasts. I'm hearing you say that they're kind of like holding it down in some ways in preserving some sort of, you mentioned protection for children, some
Yeah. The
autonomy.
normalization of children being ours, because I feel like that's the huge, I mean, that's it right now, right? Like who do children belong to? I mean, that's the big, that's, I mean, that's what really like your work could be really put like not just female erasure, but when you think about what's happening to children, it's like what rights do parents have? Do mothers have? Yeah, and so I feel like sometimes when there's a hot button issue, like Zach and I will joke and be like, "Where are the Christians? Like, come on," because they're kind of like the freedom majority in a
Mm-hmm.
sense, you know?
Yeah.
Where are they?
Yeah, and that was tricky for me when I first like woke up to the like the lies about the vaccine industry and all of that, like in 2018, it was hard for me to reconcile that like I didn't have all these same cultural experiences as predominantly what I was encountering at medical freedom events and networking. They would say things like "God bless," and I'd be like, "Ooh."
Yeah,
Which,
no, I
yeah, I'm just
completely
not
relate.
triggered anymore. I'm just like, I don't, it
No,
doesn't
I'm not
upset
either.
me. I love that there are strong values there. And obviously we know that it can go to the other end, but yeah, definitely not as triggered. Definitely had that get off your high horse. Who do kind of moment of like
Mm,
your life experience and entrance into feminism and being a mother of 5 children and just it is a kind of like you don't quite fit the box. Like we can't kind of pin you down. And I think a lot of women who follow the podcast and who I'm working with are in that spot of like I don't quite fit here and I don't quite fit there, and so where can I go? Because there is that, like you mentioned, the it's a great book, but and I definitely still find myself doing
mm.
that. Like it's a great course, but it's a great podcast, but and I feel like I've had those
You can't
moments
just soak it
directed
up
at
like a
me.
sponge, like a robot.
Yes. I know when I went to Israel, people were like, no,
Oh, really? Oh,
we
wow. Yeah.
can't believe it. You said that even like before they even knew what I thought about anything. It was like, you said though you're using the word Israel, so you're flagging yourself as
Like a Zionist.
like a Zionist and you're anti-Palestine and you're whatever. And I'm like, the fall from grace. Nobody's ever gonna check all your boxes. Sorry,
Right.
but as you were talking about what was it, the receiving more and resting more, I guess we could segue into like the how do women start to distinguish between instinct and instinct injury?
That's a really great question. I was thinking about this after we talked about it last week. And this kind of goes with the whole polarity thing too. Like where are you getting these prescriptives? And I was thinking about Gerda Lerner and how she, like to loosely quote her, she talks about how, woman was like the first colonized people group. And then to quote Jane Clare Jones, she's always said that we're like variously remembering and reimagining and then constructing together some idea of what it might look like to be a collective class of people. And I feel like this is true for free birth, for like, because under the banner, the umbrella of free birth, I'm including like cyclical living, frequency medicine, like in your mind, herbal medicine, like Germanic healing framework, all of that. And so I just think that we're all doing it together
Mm,
because we don't have the same recorded history that men do. I mean, we do have some like matriarchal, matrilineal records, but also a lot of it is getting reconstructed, reimagined, and like repostulated. And even if we did have the same kind of historical construction that men did, we probably want to like reimagine it for ourselves anyway, you know? So that's something that I was thinking about when it comes to seeing rules as unsavory, is that really we're all just here trying to reimagine
mm,
what it is to be woman, what it is to have these life passages and these life seasons. And there are so many different like schools of thought and lineages that we can draw from, like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, right? And like none of it. And I think I wonder sometimes if this is like particularly American because we have such a Calvinist, like fundamentalist Christian background. Because you can actually correct me if this is wrong, but sometimes I think that even the trans stuff is like, I talk to old friends that are either still Christian or they're not anymore, and it seems to me like the people that have been the most religious, which is a really American kind of
mm,
reality. Part of our culture is so religious compared to people in like different countries in Europe, and It's like the trans stuff is just, it's just so Catholic. It's so Calvinist. It's a complete religion. And then I wonder also if it's American women who are hearing these prescriptives or suggestions and thinking like, I feel guilt. Like that's not a normal human to state of being. They just
Yes.
feel guilt about everything. And I've had to kind of
Right.
unlearn that,
Right. Right.
to be like,
Yes.
I didn't take your advice or follow your rules and now I feel terrible. Or the opposite, which I kind of inhabited, like fuck your rules. It's like I was treating the midwife like I did the church as a little girl. Like I am going to do the dishes. Like we have no
Right.
idea how to get in touch with. It's like I'm either going to like completely rebel against, or I'm just going to soak it up like a sponge. It's not like we don't have minds or hearts of our own. Like we're not able. So yeah, I guess you asked about instinct injury. I just think that's sort of a long road. And I think it comes to like getting in touch with our bodies and out of our heads. Like that's been a huge practice for me with my first wild pregnancy, free birth, 4 years ago. And even now is like body mapping. Like, how do you feel in your body? All of this stuff, like, because we live so much in our heads here in like postmodern, post industrial in the West. And it makes me think of Susan Griffin's book that I've told you about so much, Woman in Nature. Like, we really
Yeah.
distrust the body.
Yeah.
And so, like, sometimes I'll feel pressure here. Like, you can actually tell if something's good for you or not based on your body
Totally.
without all the like circus games and rationalizations. And I feel like in America, a lot of us want to turn anything into religion. I don't know if that's particularly American. It's just a guess.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Like you were talking
That
about seed cycling and, oh no, I did 36 days instead of 40 postpartum. And now I'm going
right.
to have a terrible postpartum. What?
Right. Or like I'm gonna like I don't really want to eat this, but I think it's good for me, so I'm gonna make
That's, yeah, total
myself.
instinct injury.
It just occurred to me now, but I think having recovered from an eating disorder is instinct building, instinct recovery. Having recovered, having been through a psychological prison of monitoring and questioning and guilt and shame and measuring and all that goes along with an eating disorder. That's the example that came to mind. Like I go to restaurants now and I'm like, what do I want to eat? Like not like what do I want versus what I should have or
Mm-hmm.
what will keep me at the weight I'm at. It's like, oh my gosh, what I want actually now lines up with what feels nourishing. That's
Mm-hmm.
cool.
Right.
Like that's awesome. That is
So you're
so, and
not
that's
in rebellion, because
no.
that's the whole thing with food too, is like sometimes you want to order the like shitty thing because you shouldn't have. It's all this religious dance, right? Where
Yes.
where you don't even know what you want because you're
Mhm.
just, you're just in reaction to something that you're not supposed to have, or
Yeah. I love that I can use Instagram as a sounding board. And I had some grace with myself after that rant. I was like, I'm sick of the rules. Who else is sick of the rules? But I was conflating all this other stuff that I've been witnessing that won't get into this episode, but pyramid scheme stuff going on that I'm just like, not today, not today. So I was just going like,
mm-hmm.
I can't have one more influencer or author tell me what I need. I can't do it. And
But that's healthy instinct to
I say
me.
this humbly as a
You
coach, but
know?
I'm not soliciting and telling you that your life is going to be changed forever and ever and ever, and that like this is your path to salvation.
No, it's all
God damn
religion.
it.
That's what I mean. Yeah, it's
It
all
is totally religion.
religious zealotry. Is that a word?
I think you should make it one. I support you.
But it is, no, I see that. I mean, we're in like the age of information, so it comes
Yeah.
at you from all sides
Yes.
and you lose yourself. You can. And I
Yeah.
think that your whole rant, which I actually didn't see, but sounds like it comes from a healthy place, which is, it's not to say that women shouldn't rest with their babies. That was the big one when we talked about it. I was
Right.
just thinking like, oh God, it does go by so quickly. Like when I didn't rest with my babies, I remember when they were maybe 2 months old or 6 weeks old, I would
Mm-hmm.
break down sobbing because it felt like I just gave birth to them
Yeah.
yesterday. And I felt angry. I felt
Right.
like, why wasn't I allowed to lay in bed with them? It just was gone. you know,
Hmm.
but, where you're coming from is this place of, of wanting to kind of reevaluate why we choose to do what we do,
Yeah,
you know,
for
and especially
sure.
if so many women are feeling guilt. I mean, that's like on them. I mean, I think it's our own responsibility if we want to live from that place. But it does show to me the sort of knee-jerk reaction to digest everything as like a religious dogma
Yes.
that
Yes.
we collectively have, right? Like
Hmm.
where we're just like, and then we go around and tell people, this is the
Hmm.
thing. Like I found it.
Right. I remember not feeling like when I started tracking my cycle and I was just so into all of the teaching of the method of fertility awareness and I gave my blood to Washington Square Park a couple times, but I was
Yeah.
like I'm not witchy enough. I'm just not witchy enough. And that hurts. And I don't know if that'll ever change, but I was just like convinced I wasn't witchy enough. And like there was just a new standard. It's like, oh, I don't want to be like the pornified, version of whatever. And
Right.
now I'm gonna hold myself to this other standard where I'm not enough or compare or whatever. And I'm like, wait a minute. It's just the same thing. It's just
It's
the
the same thing.
same subjecting, except for that one is informed by patriarchy. You could argue that the other one is informed by our physiology. The thing that I mentioned on the story on stories too was that I can't remember exactly now. It was like it doesn't make you less feminine or less female to not fulfill these to not follow these rules, basically. Like just kind of reiterating what we've just talked
Right.
about, like release the guilt, find what works, totally rest. Obviously 40 days is like actually nothing. I
Right.
still don't know if I'll stay in and around my bed in 40 days. Like I'll have to report back spot, or maybe I'm not going to want to come out of bed for 100,
Right.
but I was totally having a knee jerk to like, not another goddamn rule, like not another goddamn doctrine, not another goddamn book that you have to put on your recommended reading list for every birth client. Like I just,
Like with when you have your babies, like you'll know,
yeah.
oh, I'm done with my bedroom now. I want to be on the couch, or I want to take a little walk today. Like you'll know.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've always been like a little saved from that. I was thinking about how you said so many women don't fit into these boxes, and I remember when the sentence came into my mind probably 10, maybe even 20 years ago. I was like, oh, I'm not a joiner. Like that's not my personality. And it just released me. I was like, I don't want to join anything, and that's really who I am, like at my core. I just read everything. I'm interested in everything. I really am. I mean, reasonably, but like I feel a lot of resistance
Mm-hmm.
to being
To
like,
the joining. Yeah.
yeah, to like being folded into something. And I think that there are probably so many of us like that. I mean, that's kind of what you're expressing.
Yeah.
Um, it's like a healthy desire not to just be absorbed in like some kind of collective consciousness where
Right.
you,
Yeah.
which is probably why I didn't maybe become born again a few years ago when everyone,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, making a
Yeah.
little an inappropriate joke, but like, but I just like I just everything feels a little bit at arm's length for me, and then I just try to see, but like I said with the whole postpartum thing, it took me hitting a huge wall to say
Mm-hmm.
I didn't like stay in bed because I thought it'd be fun, though it really was. It was really fun. But I did it because I just thought I can't survive another year or
Yeah.
two postpartum
Yeah.
feeling like I'm
Yeah.
mentally ill. And so everyone tells me this is the way, you know. So
Totally.
that took sort of a leap of faith. It wasn't like I felt that in my body. I just felt like maybe this will work. And it did. I mean, like we're mammals. We're supposed to bond with our babies. We're supposed to pass them around and go back to the grind, go jogging.
Gosh, I don't even jog on my best days. Um, is there anything? Well, obviously there's a gazillion more things we could get into, but is there anything that you feel like based on what we talked about so far that you want to kind of speak more to on the topic of the question that I got asked today and the ask me anything about parenting?
Oh gosh, that's a huge one. Yeah.
teenage boys. I mean, any kind of anything you want to say on how to do that? I was like, it's a blank slate for me. I'm gonna direct this
Yeah, yeah.
question to Amy.
So the way that I'm answering now is not how I would answer even 3 years ago, 5 years ago. But I think in just watching my sons grow and different reading that I've done, and really like, I don't know if this is the trajectory for a lot of women, but for me, it's like I found the analysis. I was able to understand a lot of the like rage and like extraction, whether that was like sexual, emotional. And I had, a lot of like latent anger toward men and male people, which I think is fine. And of course, it's fine. But for me, it took a few years to begin to deal with boys and men again on like a level of specificity. I just had this idea like, this is how they are. This is what they do. Statistically, this is what they do. And I would say these things and think these things in relation, like in a long-term relationship with a man and raising two sons. And I wasn't careful back then to think about how them overhearing that might have
Mm,
affected them negatively and affected my relationship with them. Of course, my husband, but I'm more talking about my sons who are like developing emotionally. And that's something over the past few years that I've just become more aware of is the way that like a political stance I hold or a conviction about the extraction of all kinds of female labor worldwide and the unwillingness for media or legal entities to name the problem, when we need like the hashtag these are not our crimes and all of that is how that might be like interpreted or received or digested by my sons, like me
mm,
just going on and on about this. And I think my boys are actually really different from my girls. And that's something that I wouldn't have ever said. And I don't think I would like wanted to allow them to be different. Do you know what I mean? Because I was very like more PC, like gender abolitionist than I am now.
mm,
And not to keep quoting Jane Clare Jones, but she has an essay that I love, and it's called On the Being of Female People. And one of the sentences, which just cracked a lot of things open for me, it's like 2018, 2019, she says that she doesn't believe that there ever were cultures in which no meaning was attached to to
mm.
sexed bodies, but that it's in like who does the naming. And so I think it makes sense when like for those of us like encountering the analysis for the first time that we would maybe want to imagine some utopia in which there's no meaning. I don't even think of that as utopia now, but going through so much like unhealthy socialization as a female person, there's like a response to that, which is like no one's going to tell me what it means to be female ever. It doesn't mean anything. You know what I mean? Like it's completely it's like free of any consequence. That and I'm not speaking for you, but that's how
Mhm.
because I felt so shackled by all the expectations of like fundamentalist religion. And then I definitely raised my boys with that kind of like fog of like boys and girls are the same. And they just like wouldn't ever act the same. And one of
You're
my
like, it's not working.
it's not working. Yeah. And one of my close friends has two boys that are close to my boy's age. They're almost like siblings or cousins. It's like we would sometimes like we were part of this mom group, like an informal but really special group, like where we'd breastfeed each other's babies and we'd get together 2 or 3 times a week, and we walked with each other through separation and divorce and all kinds of things. Like it was a really special group of women, and we met each other through using the same midwife. But my really close friend who's like a sister to me, it's like we would start to hear that they were getting together without us. We were the ones that we each had two boys and the others were all girls. And so they would go to a woman's house, they'd trade off weekly and have like muffins and coffee, and like we started to not get invited. you know and so we just go to the park,
Oh my
and our
gosh.
boys would see each other and they would take their shirts off and they would like hit each other with sticks no matter what we did. They were just like barbarians. We couldn't even talk. Like we'd hang out for all day and then we'd go home at night when they'd go to bed and talk for 2 hours. It was like we didn't even see each other because it was so chaotic. Screaming, hanging from branches, you know. And I'm not saying girls can't be that way, because I grew up, I remember my first like gendered moment as a child. I was actually 4 or 5, so like in between my two little girls' age. I was telling this to Zach the other night. I mean, it's a story I've told him before, but all the boys, I was in some kind of like church camp or something. I was really young, like preschool to kindergarten, and all the boys like ripped their shirts off, like raw, like they were going to go fight, and I ripped mine off too, because that's the kind of little girl I was, right? So it's not that there's no variation. I was like, yeah, it's summer, it's hot, like I don't even know what we're gonna do. It's gonna be awesome. Like I'm feeling my body. And I remember this teacher came up to me and like grabbed my arm really sternly, and she's like, "You're a girl." And that was my first. And I remember I went and cried. I felt shame about my body. She's like, "Do not take your shirt off," which is so ridiculous. And it makes me sad thinking of my youngest daughter around that age who definitely, you know, I mean, she's talked about wishing that she was a boy or that she is a boy, my almost 4-year-old, because she sees, like, that's how I was as a girl. You can see that they get to, like, I don't know, do they have guns? Like, what is it that they're doing? It looks really fun.
Right.
So, but anyway, all of that being said, of course, there's variation and nuance. However, I think I had this PC, uh, really kind of like fascist urge to make my boys like not want to rip their shirts off and not turn everything into a gun and not make it so I was uninvited to places where like little girls would play, dress up, and they would take every game that they were playing house, and the boys would be like, FBI busting in. And I was just like, no, we're not going to be invited back. That's not how these little girls want to play.
The muffins and coffee, and that's
Like,
hysterical.
I'm not, or they'd be like, just something totally inappropriate for that setting. And so, yeah, my advice would be, and this is really new for me over the past few years, is like coming to see my boys. Like, what if it's not all socially informed? And what if I don't have to like control their behavior? And what if I can accept them for who they are and understand that like there may be a time and a place for boys and men to do whatever it is. Like they're not women and they're not girls. And that doesn't mean that I think there should be prescriptives for how girls behave, because I was definitely like rough and tumble. And I didn't like the prescriptives that were, this sort of like performative femininity. Yeah, but this is all really new for me. And I will say though, on just like a more traditional feminist note, that my boys do lots of stuff around the house. So that's my practical advice.
And I think just on the basis of alone that your children are not like addicted to screens and don't have their own individual, iPhones and iPads. And like when I first met your kids, I was like, oh my God. And I just want to say, your kids are so amazing. I miss all of them, each one of them so much. And we were at a restaurant like maybe 6 months ago, and we went to get ice cream, and the ice cream part had like closed, but the guy working there just said like, you know what? These kids were so well behaved. Everyone's getting free ice cream. And this is just like an average day in your family. This is just like normal for your family. Like they're just are such wonderful adapted children. Doesn't mean they don't have tantrums and don't get scared and aren't just like normal, having their experiences. But I'm not a mother yet, but I spent a lot of time doing childcare with a lot of boys and a lot of girls, all different ages. And I think your kids are extra, extra special. So whatever you're doing, it's awesome. And yeah, I just think you have so much wisdom to share with mothers of boys, mothers of girls, new moms, experience. I mean, just across the board. So how can women find you, and what are your like outward offerings right now that you're
So I just got an Instagram account which sent me into like an existential stupor, which about. Like, so it's not really my thing, but it's okay, it's fine. Now the kids tease me too. Like if I take a picture of something, they're like, are you putting that on the gram?
That's so
no
funny.
I'm not.
They're like, my mom's an Instagram influencer.
Yeah. Like, no. So it's called On Domesticity, and I have recently started doing one-on-ones with women through Free Birth Society. A few years ago, I did an unschooling workshop. And so, like, kind of slowly through that, women have reached out. And I hope to very soon have some of my writing and music up through a website that will be attached to the Instagram account.
Correct.
Yeah.
Link in the bio.
In the bio. Right. But I just went ahead and did it. Maybe the cart's before the horse a little bit, but it's
No.
okay. I had to go ahead and do it because it was sending me into like an identity crisis because I never thought I would have an Instagram account, but I'm still here.
She made it.
I made it.
Thank you, Amy, for this beautiful conversation. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend or family member who needs to hear this content. And if you do share it on social media, don't forget to follow and tag me at Whose Body Is It? So until next time.